Ben Weaver, Illinois attorney. I help folks buy and sell their principal residence, and I also help folks with wills and trusts and other estate planning documents. Today, I'm here to talk to you about the Illinois Multi-Board Real Estate Contract 8.0, page 3. All right, so page 3 starts out with a continuation of the financing contingency. If the buyer must get a loan to buy the house, they initial paragraph 8A, and they fill in details like what is the interest rate, are they getting a VA loan, an FHA loan, a conventional loan, that sort of thing. Explain in detail on my other video about page 2 of the contract, but page 3 wraps up that paragraph. Then it goes into paragraph 8B. Now, paragraph 8B of the contract is if the buyer is paying all cash for the house. There's no financing contingency. They're saying, we have the money, we're going to go in there and buy it on the closing day, end of story. The next is paragraph 8C. Now, 8B and 8C are very similar. They're both cash transactions, so the buyer is buying the house with cash, but the difference between 8B and 8C is allowing the buyer to get a mortgage if needed. So paragraph 8B is utilized if the buyer is just going to pay cash flat out. That's it, end of story. Paragraph 8C is utilized if the buyer plans on paying cash for the house, but if they go to their financial advisor says, yeah, that's not really the best idea, you should get a loan, then you want to use paragraph 8C. Paragraph 8C allows the buyer to get a loan if needed, and the buyer and seller agree that they'll cooperate with any of the lender's requirements. At the end of the day, paragraph 8C, even though the buyer and seller are allowing a lender to get involved in the transaction, the buyer still, on the closing day, needs to have the financing in hand to buy the house. If the buyer gets to the closing day and they decide they do need a loan and it's not ready to close yet, too bad. You gotta raid that piggy bank and find some money to buy that house one way or another. Paragraph 9, the homeowner's insurance. Now this paragraph is discussed quite a bit, and I think they may be overanalyzed tiny bit. So paragraph 9 gives the buyer 10 business days after the contract is signed to contact their insurance agent and make sure there are no insurance issues with the house. It's a good idea for any buyer to contact their insurance agent as soon as the contract is signed and before the home inspection, because if you contact your insurance agent and the insurance agent says, oh, hey, the last owner replaced the roof 2 years ago, we can see they filed an insurance claim for it, then it gives you the opportunity to tell your home inspector, hey, check out that roof and make sure it was really replaced 2 years ago. Make sure it doesn't look like it's a 20-year-old roof. All right, I'm getting ahead of myself. Paragraph 9 gives the buyer the opportunity to check in with their insurance agent and make sure that the house is insurable. Make sure that there are no inflated fees. Basically, make sure the house is fine in terms of insurance in order to move forward. Paragraph 10, flood insurance. This paragraph gives the buyer a contingency to cancel the contract if it's found out that the house happens to be in a flood zone. Now, the buyer has either 10 business days after the contract is signed or up until the end of the loan contingency to find out if the house is in a flood zone. And if it is, then they can cancel the contract if need be. If the seller does not disclose the house in a flood zone, the buyer usually realizes it is in a flood zone when the lender has the appraisal done. So if the house is in a flood zone, it usually comes up long before the end of that loan contingency. Of course, if you're paying cash, it's something to think about. You don't have that lender's appraisal to find out more details about the house. So if the house is in a flood zone, do you want to have to buy flood insurance? Some people, they want to live by that river, by that lake, and they don't care at all. Other people, it's a big surprise. They don't want that extra hassle and spend that extra money and they want to get out of that contract ASAP. Okay, and the last paragraph on page 3, paragraph 11, statutory disclosures. This is just a checklist of all the disclosures the seller is obligated to give the buyer. It should be disclosed before the contract is signed. Sometimes, depending on how fast the contract comes together. So there you have it. Page 3 of the Illinois Real Estate Multi-Board 8.0 contract. We start out with terms about financing the house, then we get into insurance, and finally, statutory disclosures. Did you have any questions about this page? Leave it in the comments below. I'm Ben Weaver, Illinois attorney. I help folks buy and sell houses throughout the Chicagoland area. I also help folks with wills and trusts and other estate planning documents. And I'll see you in the next video.